Welcome. It's good to be together as we celebrate the life and legacy of Mildred. Beloved by so many. When she entered a room, a chorus of "Mildred" often went up. It is hard to say goodbye to her. Mildred was interested in what would be on the other side of this life. Curious, as was her nature, she didn't think death was the end of the story. Whatever that mystery holds, she was right, of course, because love and connection continue. We are here not because Mildred died, but because she lived, because she continues to be loved. In the words of Khalil Gibran, when you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight. And it's true. We come together to mourn because we are lucky enough to have known Mildred. We come together for comfort, yes, and to show our love and support to her family and Jerry in their deep loss. But we are also here to give thanks, to express all that she continues to mean to us, and to allow her spirit to continue through us. In the Unitarian Universalist tradition, we light a chalice at each worship service to remember our connection to each other throughout history. The practice goes back to the Nazi-era Europe, when the Unitarian Service Committee would use the symbol of the flaming chalice to let others know they were a trustworthy member of the resistance. Over the course of the pandemic, the old chalice of the Unitarian Universalists at Riderwood disappeared. Maybe someone was deep cleaning and broke it. Maybe a passerby thought it looked like a nice cake display plate. Who knows? But we were without a chalice until the anonymous donation of this one in honor of Mildred. It is fitting that we will remember Mildred in the years ahead when we light this symbol of our connection. She was such an important part of our community. We light our chalice today to honor Mildred's bright light. Mildred was one of the people on the hiring committee for the Unitarian Universalists at Riderwood. And throughout my interview, I was convinced she hated me. She shot intense question after question my way with a poker face that would rival the professionals in Vegas. After I had accepted the position, Mildred immediately came up to me and gleefully said, "I couldn't wait to tell you, I went to Barnard too." And that was Mildred. She took her responsibilities so seriously, but as soon as she could, she reached out to build relationship, to let others know that they were appreciated and included. And she was thinking of those she was in relationship with until the very end. Days before her death, she was still thanking the many groups she had been involved with, writing letters to loved ones, focusing all her limited energy on others. It was to her great frustration that she could not finish every thank you. Mildred said that service and love were core to her understanding of what it meant to be a Unitarian Universalist and to live a meaningful life. And she lived those values. With us, in her incredible career as a psychiatrist when women simply didn't do that. And with her family, who she loved dearly and was so proud of. Mildred told me, "Daughters are wonderful. Everyone should have as many as possible." Mildred read the newspaper every day, but not just for the sake of keeping up with events. She read the newspaper like a map to see what direction she needed to go to make the world a better place. She had a powerful affinity for the outcast and advocated for justice, fairness, and sustainability throughout her life. She was always willing to volunteer her time. For years, she was the backbone of the We Care group here, visiting members of the Unitarian Universalists at Riderwood who were facing health challenges. We all hope We live well enough to make the world better for our being in it. But Mildred went above and beyond. She believed that we all of us, are made up of an energy that connects us to everything in the universe. Sometimes she called that energy God, but she wasn't particular about it. The name wasn't the important thing. She saw the different manifestations of that energy like waves in the ocean. We seem separate, but that's just the part we're playing right now. She said that when we die, we join that which is always present, always accessible. In the end, we're all a piece of that same source, and we return to that source. Mildred worked for others because she saw in them this shared sacredness. Very near the end, Mildred told me she had finally stopped reading the news. She said, "I have to leave worrying about the world to others now." We are those others. We pick up the work of making our tiny corners of the world a little better, just as Mildred did with hers. Now it is our work to recognize the sacred in each other. This is how we connect to her legacy. This is how we remember her. May it be so. At this time, we will have some pre-recorded remembrances of Mildred.
Dad, tell us about the first time that you met Mildred.
After my wife Evelyn died in September, I ate most of my dinners at the cafe. It was a very friendly place, and I usually found people I knew to sit with. But even if you didn't, you could always find somebody to sit with. And then this time I saw a woman who I hadn't noticed before sitting alone, and I asked if I could join her at the table, and she agreed. And we began to talk, and we found out we were both planning trips. Me to my son and daughter-in-law in Houston, she to her daughter in New Brunswick. As I learned later, she was not just visiting her daughter, but actually lecturing on neuroscience at Rutgers University. Anyway, I came back after 2 weeks and hadn't seen her, and I was wondering whether she sort of had given up on Riderwood. But eventually I did see her again, and that essentially was our first meeting. In subsequent talks, she had a very vague recollection of that particular meeting.
So you did not make not make a amazing impression on her at that time.
I certainly did not.
So after that inauspicious start, how did you two eventually get together?
Okay, well, that again is a good story, and it actually also affected the cafe. Riderwood closed down the cafe the following April, April 1st. And at, at a chess club session on April 12th, I remember that date very well because we eventually used it as our anniversary date. On April, to compensate for closing the cafe, Ryder Wood said that we could have our dinner at the pub. And when our Scrabble session finished, I said loudly for anyone who could hear that I plan to take advantage of this and eat at the pub. Would anybody like to join me? And one person said yes, it was Mildred. And that, in effect, became our first date. And in a sense, we became inseparable from that point in time. We found out that we have much in common. We both enjoyed music. We certainly enjoy Scrabble and other games, and we like crossword puzzles. And most important, we each Ryder Wood at that time had many different shows, musical and otherwise. And we each knew of a particular one that the other might be interested in. And we decided to go together to those shows. And that started everything.
That's great. I know that crossword puzzles on Sunday became a ritual for you. How did that happen?
Okay, actually, Saturday was our crossword day. Well, I mentioned that I enjoyed the puzzles that appeared in these Sunday magazines of the Post, designed by Merv Regal, who was considered the top crossword puzzle creator of that time. And I enjoyed doing them, but didn't often finish them. And she said she'd like to do that with me. And lo and behold, as we worked together, those puzzles occasionally got finished or got close to being finished. And it became a regular Saturday ritual, a very important one. And even near the end, when I visited her at Upper Ridge, when she was on oxygen with a very loud, noisy machine, we struggled through and worked on a puzzle. And that's about it.
What?
As we celebrate and pay tribute to Mildred, I thought I would start with a memory that once you hear it, you will say, yes, that was Mildred. Mildred was very proud of Steve's and my participation in social and environmental causes. When she learned that I was going to make a brain hat for the March for Science, she invited me into her apartment to view her model of the human brain. It was very important to her that I construct the brain properly and accurately. Yes, that was Mildred. It is hard to put into words how grateful I am that Mildred and Jerry met and fell in love. Witnessing their compassion and tenderness grow was wonderful to behold. and it brought such delight to see them together. Mildred cared deeply about me, and I cared and loved her as if she were my second mother. We had an understanding that went beyond words. Maybe it was because both of us have neurological conditions, which brought about a higher level of empathy. Mildred was such an inspiration to me. Her strength, empathy, social consciousness, and compassion to love. Her capacity to live life to the fullest. We were all so lucky to have Mildred in our lives. My memories of Mildred are truly a blessing, and I cherish each of them. May your memories of this lovely lady bring you peace and comfort.
So, I want to tell you a little bit about the gifts that my sisters and I received from our Aunt Mimi over the years, from when we were kids all the way till, I would say, Aunt Mimi was well into her 80s and still sending gifts. When a box would arrive from Rochester, we were always very excited because we literally had no idea what to expect might be in the box. Could be a barometer with a little colored baubles bobbing up and down in liquid. Could be a geode. Could be a blown glass black and striped penguin that was just absolutely incredible and looked beautiful on the black piano. Could be a black geode of crystals all the way from Alaska with a black bear bouncing on top of the rock. Maybe a mother wolf frolicking with her pups, a little statuette, or maybe a wall hanging with wolves or some kind of cool animal on it. The point is, it could be just about anything, and we were just always so delighted to find out what that anything was. Full of wonder, my Aunt Mimi's gifts were full of curiosity, idiosyncratic, just the best. All-time best might have been a filament spray coming out of a black box, and all these different filaments were all different rainbow colors, and we were fascinated by that, although I don't think we ever came up with a name for what it was. And it was only in my adulthood that I came to realize that Aunt Mimi's gifts were, of course, a reflection of her. She herself was full of wonder, full of curiosity, always wanted to stay up with the latest scientific developments, both in her fields and of science in general. And I think she wanted to give these gifts to share her values, to share what she appreciated, to share what was special about this world to her with the people who were special to her. So those gifts, while perhaps unappreciated for that aspect when we were small, were certainly received with delight, and I think many of us actually have quite a few of them still to this day.
Hello, Jessie Lou Vaccarelli here from Rochester, New York. I've loved Millie for decades, and although we're not technically related, we shared something very special. So let me tell you what Millie means to me. M. Motherly. Millie has been like my second mom. She's been a great listener, patiently waiting until I finished telling my story, and then patiently waiting for my invitation for her to share her opinion, which always came from her heart. I. Interested. Millie was always interested in how I was doing in life, with my education and my career, and how my family was, my husband, my children, my grandchildren. She hung on every word and made me feel as though I was her own. L. Loving. Millie had a huge heart with room for everyone. There was no limit to her compassion, her understanding, and acceptance. She loved the entire human family, and it showed in everything she did. D. Dedicated. Millie was dedicated to her profession. She did nothing halfway. She always put her whole self into everything she did and all that she was. My mother described her once as the best in the business. People were her business. R, resilient. We all know what Millie had been through these last several months, and yet each time I spoke to her, she had a positive attitude and a sense of humor. To me, she was fierce and fearless, despite her challenges. E, enlightened. Millie was a sponge when it came to current events, the latest medical breakthroughs, even what we might consider the mundane stories of day-to-day life. She knew that everything in life had meaning and potential, and she let nothing pass her by. And D, devoted. There are no words that can describe the devotion Millie had for her family, her daughters, her son, and daughter-in-laws, her beautiful grandchildren, my mom, her special friend Jerry. She kept us all in her heart, and we will always keep her in ours. I'm grateful to Lynn and Paula for sharing their mom with me. She's been a bright light, something sorely needed in the world today, and she will be missed. Rest in peace, Millie. I love you with all my heart.
Good afternoon. My name is Carol Revac, and I was a friend and colleague of Mildred's while she lived and worked in Rochester, New York. Mildred had a long and widely impactful career here in Rochester as a psychiatrist, and I was told by a colleague that she was actually the first female psychiatrist in Rochester. I first met her in 1981 when she interviewed me for a staff psychologist position at Western Monroe Mental Health Center. And this was one of 4 mental health centers in the wider Rochester region that was to carry out the United States Congress's directives to provide accessible mental health care to all citizens in the 1970s and 1980s. Mildred was the medical director. As I am a voracious reader, well, what I most remember from the interview was that she asked me what I was reading lately. And as I am a voracious reader, this impressed me, that she was really trying to know who I was as a person. Mildred's voice and vision were powerful drivers of the excellence in care offered to our large, diverse community, and she also insisted that all the staff received continual and high-quality training and supervision. Western Monroe Mental Health Center reflected her understanding of what good mental health care entailed, and all of us were proud to have worked there. Times changed politically and economically, and Mildred, as well as many staff, moved on. Mildred started a private practice where she remained until she retired. She was known as extremely kind to patients and available to other providers. A colleague, Dr. Beth Gelsma, who referred many patients to Mildred and collaborated with her regarding their treatment, described her as, in quotes, extremely capable, warm, and brilliant, end quotes. She never got ruffled. Mildred shared her knowledge of diagnoses and medical care freely with colleagues and helped them grow in their understanding of complex and challenging conditions. The final context in which I knew Mildred was as a member of our decades-long women therapist group. A group of 6, Mildred was the psychiatrist, there were 2 psychologists, and 3 clinical social workers, and we decided to meet to explore research on feminist psychotherapy. We met each month in one of our homes over tea and dessert while research was presented and discussed. This morphed into one of us presenting a challenging case each meeting and then receiving comments and suggestions on how to move forward. Over the years, as we got to know each other more intimately, we began to share about our personal lives. Since Mildred and I both lived in Greece, a western suburb of Rochester, we often drove together to wherever the meeting was being held that month. This was an added opportunity for each of us to catch up on each other's lives. Since Mildred was almost 25 years older than me, I considered her a professional mentor, a valued friend, and an example of courage and perseverance in the face of personal trials. In our group, Mildred was certainly not the most talkative member, but always calm and wise in her advice or comments. I also know she greatly valued the friendship, acceptance, and support we all found in this unique group.
At this time, I invite anyone who'd like to share memories of Mildred to come up to the lectern to speak.
Good afternoon. I'm Lynn Rust. I'm Mildred's second daughter. This morning, if it hadn't rained so much yesterday, I would have taken my microbial ecology class to collect mud from the county stormwater holding ponds. I think Mom would have enjoyed the temporal juxtaposition of collecting mud in the morning and celebrating her life in this chapel this afternoon. She would also have appreciated the phrase temporal juxtaposition, though it wouldn't fit in a Scrabble game. Mom was a lifelong learner. When Paul and I were growing up, she kept her psychiatric journals in the bathroom because that was the only place she could read in peace. Her plans for retirement included catching up on her reading, particularly the magazines stacked on the floor and the unread books on the shelves. Well, that didn't happen, as she became involved in volunteer work and social groups in which she always took on a leadership role. So when she was diagnosed with kidney failure, we agreed it was a good opportunity to finally catch up on her reading, and she kept her Science News magazines in her dialysis bag. Mom always loved classical music. She set her radio for 5 a.m. to wake her up to the classical music station. She sang from her college days at Barnard to her years at Riderwood in the Grace Notes. She sang us to sleep as we were growing up. Our parents gifted us with piano lessons and music theory when we were in grade school. So naturally, when I went to college, I took music appreciation, figuring it would be an easy A. Instead, it was the lowest grade of all my 4 years. Are you my mother? So when Paul and I came across Mom's written instructions for music at her memorial service, we dutifully took note, so to speak. She asked for 3 pieces. The shortest, the Dvorak, is 25 minutes. Fauré's Requiem is 35 minutes, and the Schubert is 54 minutes. But she also wrote that if there wasn't enough time for the entire Schubert, then we could just play the 4th movement. It occurred to me that Mom would have been perfectly fine to have a concert for you in place of a service. But here we are. I want to tell you a story about our mother's sense of civic responsibility and her love of brain research. She had always planned to donate her body to a medical school. But when she was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, she dedicated her brain for Parkinson's research and was signing the forms for her brain donation just weeks before she died. And speaking of death, she never flinched from discussing death and dying, and given the choice of pancreatic cancer and kidney failure, chose kidney failure and scheduled it as she scheduled any other life event. Would that we could all have that kind of control over our last days. Thanks for showing me the way, Mom. I am one of my Aunt Mimi's nieces, sister to one you saw up there. My name's Tara. And I want to say 2 things. I want to echo what my sister said about the wonderful gifts from our Aunt Mimi. Because as I heard
my sister Dina preparing that, I thought, you know, that subscription to Ranger Rick that I grew up with as a kid had a profound impact on me. And to this day, one of the driving forces of my being is creating sustainable ecosystems in my backyard. And, you know, how many pictures of the wood pile in the backyard and, you know, Ranger Rick rifling through it looking for grubs. It resonated and still does to this day. So I'm very grateful. I also wanted to share a note of love from my mother, Aunt Mimi's sister, who was not able to come down today. And just briefly, there was mention of music, and you might be interested to know they had a very interesting childhood. And one of the more unusual aspects of it was that an orchestra rehearsed regularly in their living room. So you can see why, you know, she was ingrained from the start with music.
Good afternoon. My name is Sherwood, and I work for Lynn Rust. I do lawn and landscape work, and that's how I met Mildred. And I knew Mildred for a very short time compared to many people, but there were some things that she did and that I witnessed that affected me, and I just wanted to share some of those things. Before I do, I wanted to say hello to Mr. Rust. But I know I've thanked you many times, okay? But I wanted to thank you publicly, okay? In my employment, there came a time where Lynn took a trip, a long-planned, detailed trip to the Great Plains of North Dakota. And when she went there, that is when we found out that Mildred was very, very sick. Now, if Lynn had said, Sherwood, my mom is sick and we'll landscape next year, I would have understood. But she did not do that. From North Dakota, she said, Sherwood, my mom's going to need some more tests, and if you could move your schedule around to take her to some of these tests, that would be great. And I was all in. And so the first trip was to Laurel, and I picked Lynn's mom up. We went to Laurel, and we got the right street, GPS, but the wrong address. And Mildred was kind of upset, and she said, Sherwood, I was not prepared today. And I said, Mildred, we're okay. We eventually found the place, and she had the numbers wrong. She said 6210 instead of 7250. But when we left to go home, going down Route 1, she said, Sherwood, that address is probably the address of another doctor somewhere. And I thought that was very funny, that she made light of it. The tests went on, and she had a battery of tests at White Oak Independence Hospital. And some kind of way, I was there with the family when the doctor came in. And when the doctor came in, he said, okay, is everybody family here? And then he looked at me. True story. And Mildred took charge. She said, Doctor, this is a very old family friend. And then we proceeded. And Mildred had a question before the doctor came in, and that was, why didn't they use high contrast dye in my procedure. And we didn't know. When the doctor came in, he explained everything that they did. And then he turned to walk out. And just when he was about to reach the door, Mildred said, "Doctor, why didn't you use high contrast dye?" And the doctor turned around, and there was like a pregnant pause, as if, "Did you just ask me that?" "Yes, you did." And the first thing he said was, "Well, Dr. Karp told me to do it. So I did it because Dr. Karp told me." But I like that too, because that showed me that she wasn't a shrinking violet. She stood up and she said what she meant. Another thing is that Lynn was torn between coming home to see her mother. And when we were at this hospital, her mother said to me, "Sherwood, you tell Lynn not to come home. Do not come home." And she said, "Lynn needs this trip. She has planned it for a long time, and it's a great transition." And so I went home and I called Lynn and I said, "Don't you dare come down 95 South, all right, because I'm going to be in trouble." And she didn't. But eventually she got home and all was well. But your mother did. She was very firm to me. She said, "Sherwood, don't let her come home." Yeah, so I got it. At a certain point, Mildred asked me, "Did my daughters share my diagnosis with you?" And I said, "Yes, they did, and I hope you don't mind." She said, "Of course not." And then the next thing she said was, "Sherwood, next month it'll be another organ." I couldn't believe it. And then she started to laugh, the Aunt Sally laugh. And she dispelled the seriousness of that moment in an instant. By this time, I formed a friendship with Mildred, and I saw what she was like, and that she was as tough as nails. She never complained, not once. And in the trips that I would take her, I took her to the oncologist, and we went directly from there to kidney dialysis. I took her there, and I couldn't believe it. And she never complained once. The closest she ever came to that, to saying anything, she said, "Sherwood, I am exhausted." And that's understandable. By this time, we had formed a friendship. I went into a secondhand store. It's called Value Village, and it has these plaques and just interesting things. And I saw this plaque saying that you should really go through life, not trying to reach the grave in a well-preserved body, but one that's worn out, just from life. It's on the back of your program. But I saw this thing and I read it, and when I got to the end, I laughed because of what it said. And then I read it again, and I read it again. And then I went over and I picked it up, and I didn't put it down. And it was a beautiful saying, and it was $2.99. And on that day, there was a 25% discount. So I got it. So, but pennies on a dollar, because what it says about Mildred. Mildred personified the plaque, and what it said was so beautiful. I took it, I showed it to Lynn, she read it, and she laughed when she got to the end. Lynn showed it to her mother, and her mother laughed when it got to the end. one of the most powerful things that I saw her do, and even though I'm old, you can learn things late in life. And I was in her apartment with Lynn, Paula, Soraya, and I think Jerry. And here's this 93-year-old woman, racked with pain, sitting at a card table, hunched over 2 documents, one for her body and one to release her brain for the study of Parkinson's. And I just thought, she knows, what's right around the corner. And she knows that, and yet she's not saying, woe is me. Why did this happen? She is at this card table, putting her John Hancock on this thing so it can help another generation. And that was a powerful moment. And I wish I had recorded it, but it was a very, very powerful moment. And I've thought of it several times since then, and I'm sure I will for the rest of my life. But she was a selfless woman, she was tough. She never complained. And earlier the pastor said about this poker face. I wear a lot of Barack Obama t-shirts, and she took note one day, and she said, Sherwood, and she wasn't smiling or anything. She said, Sherwood, do you have any t-shirts with women on it? So Sherwood goes home, and I'm going through my dresser, and I found it. It was the Barack Obama family shot. I said, look, I got Michelle Obama and her 2 daughters, Sasha and Michelle. And I got the head nod. Yeah, that's good. So I just want to say that she was a special woman. The saying is, still waters run deep. And it was like that with her. She looked like a little frail lady, but she was tough as nails. And to you, Lynn, thank you for letting me do that in North Dakota, because that started the whole thing, my relationship with your mom. In conclusion, I want to say this, that she was tough as well. It was, what she said went, if that's how she meant it. And I was taking her to the Grace Notes choir rehearsal, and Lynn was there. And Lynn, Paul and I were in the hall. I recorded that. Paul and I were in the hall, and Lynn went in to ask her mother if she could sing with her. And her mother said, step aside, you are in the way, and kicked her out. And here she comes, red-faced, and then Sherwood thinks, well, I have some brownie points saved up. I'll go in and ask. I got on my knee. I said, is there any way that Lynn could come in here and she nodded her head. She said, he runs a tight ship? No. So I was bounced out. But I just want to say thank you for including me, just to look through the keyhole, and see this little lady. That was pretty tough, and your relationship, with her, and Paul, I'm sure it's the same, but she's on the East Coast, and so this one I saw was great. Sometimes mother-daughter relationships, kind of go off the track a little bit, but you were lockstep with her. It's like you were the left foot and she's the right. And you two really worked well together, and it was a great thing to see. So thank you very much.
I know from experience that these kinds of services
when I try to start speaking, I just try to cry too much and can't speak at all, so I wasn't planning to say anything. I said everything to my mother before she died that I wanted to say, except for one thing. And this is going to seem silly, but it's the one thing I never said to her that I wanted to say before she died. A long time ago, like maybe 30 years ago, she gave me a gift that was a chair. It was made somewhere in Scandinavia, and it's very odd looking. It was shaped like this. And you kneeled on this part and sat on this part, and the idea was there wasn't a back, so you had to strengthen your abs to sit on it. And it's sort of similar to the gifts that she gave other people. It showed her values. And one day, a couple years ago, she asked me if I still had it. And I said, yes, it's in the basement. And from the look on her face, I could tell that she thought that meant I'd put it in storage and wasn't using it. But my mind didn't work fast enough in that moment to say, no, I'm using it. The basement's finished. I do go down there and I use it. And but I didn't think fast enough in that particular moment to say that right away. And it's been in my head ever since, for the past few years, that I never told her that I still use her chair. Mom, I love you very much. Thank you for everything.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carol Barr, and I've been an aide for, I'll say, Mildred. Because when I started, I said, what's your preference? I'll call you Dr. Russ. She said, no. She was so humble. You call me Mildred or Millie, either one, but you can call me Mildred. So I've been calling her Mildred. Such a wonderful woman, such a respectful woman she was. And I worked for her, took care of her, but we became friends. It's the first client I've had that I became so close with. We shared a lot of confidential stuff together. I would talk to her, because my mom is not here, she's away in another country, so any little problem, I'll talk with her. We talked together, we left it there. She would share stuff with me, I share with her, and we just left it there, and it was a good feeling. Very strong. I was there almost to the end of her time. And she was fighting. Mornings I would say, are we gonna walk to the bathroom? She'd say, I'll try. And there am I with her, we're going. But she fought it to the end. What a spirit she had. Oh, I miss her, and I will miss her. And as for her daughters, they're wonderful women. They've treated me so well too. And I'll always remember Mildred. Always will. Thank you.
So many of you know my father, who was very close to Mildred for the past many years. And I remember as my dad's son, when, after his wonderful marriage with my mother, after she passed away for a time, that I knew he had some trepidation about telling me that he was in this relationship. And I remember a little bit of family drama, to be expected about what's going on. And then we just got to meet the wonderful, amazing woman Mildred was, and what joy she brought to all of us, and the closeness and specialness that she brought to my father these past years, and that she brought to us. And we're just ever grateful for her coming into our lives and the connection we have to the family now. We feel like we've grown some sisters and other relatives. And it's just been amazing to get to know your mother over these years. And, we just feel gratitude and love. So just wanted to share that.
I invite you now to take a moment to silently reflect on a time that Mildred brought light into your life. I think we have some readings from family.
Hello, I am Ari Webb, my Aunt Mimi's niece. And I'm going to read something that was chosen for her. It's called Call It God. Call it God if you will, the leafy trees in springtime, the early meadows, the old orchards while in apple blossom time, ridges of green Irish potato vines, the blue streams running between the dark hills, the lonely sounds at night, the wind in the oak tops, and the wind playing in the dead September corn, and running through the persimmon trees on the broken pasture fields, rabbits in the dead weeds and foxes barking from the ridge tops at night. Call it God, if you will.
And these words from Hunter S. Thompson are probably familiar by now. Life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in an attractive and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in sideways, body thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and screaming, "Woohoo! What a ride!" That's my Emmy.
And now we'll have a chance to listen to some of the music that Mildred loves so much. we extinguish this flame, but carry with us the gifts that Mildred's light brought. May you skid through life, remembering Mildred with acts of service and love for community. May it be a wild ride. Go in peace.